in 314 for a shooting at Century Theaters. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium.
Roger, keep your fires west of the smoke. You're cleared hot. An officer hit. Send me the world.
Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again.
Welcome to Tactical Tangents.
Welcome back to Tactical Tangents. This is Mike. This episode is brought to you by Ride-On Optics. Ride-On is bringing you high-quality glass at a great value. I use and trust their scopes, binoculars, and red dot sights, and you can too with their unconditional lifetime warranty. If you ever have a problem with their gear, they will replace it, not repair it. Finish up your next build and keep a little extra cash on hand for ammo so you can actually go out and shoot that thing. Find your next optic at rideonoptics.com.
And this is Jim. This episode is also brought to you by ManusX. We've talked a lot about the tactical fantasy on this podcast, and one of the quickest ways to break your tactical fantasies and actually improve your performance is by getting real feedback. One of the ways you can do that is with ManusX. You're not going to get better at shooting on your own. You need practice, data, and coaching. And you need to make the most of your ammo with good live and dry fire training. Manus is a family of training devices that tracks you while you train. It times and tracks everything you do in a drill and coaches you as you go. It is indispensable to taking your shooting to the next level. Go find them on manusx.com.
Hey guys, this is Mike. So this episode was a recording that Jim did by himself and while I was out of town, and I wanted to add a couple of my thoughts kind of before we get started here at his request. So essentially what we're trying to do is compile the recurring themes, the recurring topics or messages that we often hit in the podcast into an episode that is solely dedicated to that, to kind of rounding out our message and some of our philosophy. So there's a number of things that he's going to get into, concepts and all of that, and I'm going to do my best to just add my spin on a couple things without crossing streams too much so that he can cover his side of it. But one of the big key themes for me has to do with the people, ideas, and hardware stuff. And as a podcast, one of the things that we are trying to do is share ideas with you, the people who are going to be the doers out in the world, right? Doing public safety or military stuff or self-defense, whatever it is that you're into. And as far as ideas go, if you look at a group of people, a normal distribution of people, you're going to have the bulk of the status quo kind of in the middle. And on either end of that normal distribution, you're going to have outliers, right? And some of those outliers are the people who are stagnant and they're kind of stuck in their ways, or they do stuff because that's how we've always done it. And then on the other end, you have those ideas people, the creative types, the innovators who are chasing down the squirrels. And I tend to be a squirrels guy. Like I see a new idea and I want to explore it and I want to capture it and I want to look at it. And not every idea is something that should be implemented into your practice. But there are a lot of good ideas that or good tactics that came from that kind of mindset. So innovative people and new ideas often make people uncomfortable, but they're also what's required to kind of push the status quo and to get progress and evolution and to learn. And the reason that I think that's important is not every situation that the people, the professionals in these lines of work will face are going to be able to work out of a playbook, right? I did a scenario a little while back. It was a medical scenario for guys and gals on my SWAT team. And it was a little bit outside of the realm of stuff that they would know or understand anything about. And essentially what it boiled down to was they didn't know what to do in many cases. And the point in the debrief was hey, look, I don't pay you to have all the answers. I pay you to figure it out. Right? So just because you don't know what to do doesn't mean you get to throw your hands up. And I think if you strive to be innovative and strive to look at new ideas, it's going to increase your ability to adapt to those kind of novel or ambiguous situations that you're not otherwise prepared for. So I think that's really huge. And along that same line, you're going to hear an episode coming out pretty soon about the Las Vegas attack, the 1 October Mandalay Bay shooting. And one of our guests, retired Sergeant Ashton Pack from Las Vegas Metro, I stole this quote from him. He talks about maverick leadership. And this is another thing where, again, when there's not a playbook and there's not a set of rules, a clear set of rules for how something is going to go, sometimes you just need someone to step up and be like, hey, like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to do it anyway. Right. And so to the tune of when we say people, ideas, hardware, it's understanding that distribution of people and knowing that with progress and innovation and new ideas, like we want to advance ourselves and the communities that we work in. Right. And the thing about quote unquote people, ideas, hardware is understanding that the gear and the hardware, the tactics, all that still matter, right? Like those are still things that are important and valuable. It's not to underemphasize them or to discount or discredit them. It's to understand how big of a deal it is to find the right people for your team and to emphasize good leadership. Because if you can get that right, then the tools and the tactics will really evolve regardless of the circumstances or the problem set or the mission, right? So that's kind of a big deal. Another one is decision making. And we talk about this because we've hit on the idea of the strategic corporal. And this is the idea that in the context of law enforcement, that a single police officer out in the field can do a thing wrong. And we've seen this, right? Can do something wrong. And really, like, sometimes they can even do something right, and it has a strategic impact, a ripple effect that will go across the country and have big implications, right? Strategic implications. So we need those front level decision makers to be good at making decisions. And it's important to recognize that the chief of police or the sheriff or the medical director or whatever isn't going to be on the side of the road with you at 2:00 in the morning when you have to make a decision. You have to be the responsible adult, and our goal is to help shape and inform your decision making so that you are more capable of that. Now, you need reps, right? You need to go out and actually do this, which means getting out of your comfort zone and practicing making decisions in situations that are stressful and unpredictable and chaotic and all of those things. Another idea with decision making is how you apply rules and policy and doctrine. And Jim is going to go much more in depth on this than I will, but I just want to hit on this one thing as it applies to decision making, and that is understanding the difference between things that are concrete and abstract when we talk about rules and policy. So I'll give you the example of case law. A lot of decisions that police officers make, for example, related to use of force or search and seizure stuff, is based on case law that you have to apply to the new situation that you're in. And it's not always a black and white, like, hey, you're not allowed to do X. Like, you're not allowed to shoot a guy for this scenario. There are laws that are like that, right? But not everything is. But then it's the more abstract stuff like, well, if there's a risk of serious physical injury or death. And sometimes that risk is more nuanced, right? There's a possibility of it. Is there a probability of it? I don't know. But part of the decision making as it relates to shaping the decision making of young leaders, and I think in these lines of work, everyone on the front line is a leader of some form. Those people need to be able to apply abstract ideas and sometimes even opposing ideas in the decisions that they make, right? With competing priorities and conflicting information and all of that. So I just kind of want to hit that real quick. So I mentioned that decision making, you need to make the reps, right? You need repetition, you need feedback, you need to actually have that experience. And that leads me into proficiency and understanding that when we talk about decision making and proficiency, what we're trying to do is engineer good outcomes. We're trying to create good outcomes before the incidents occur, right? That's the key. So proficiency means you've got to be ready on the day, not get ready after the fact, not use luck and see if maybe you'll just squeeze by with what little you have. You have to be ready on that day, and that means you have to be proficient in all of your skills. And it's not just the hard skills. It's one thing to take someone out and teach them how to shoot. And I can teach someone how to shoot well and achieve a perfect score on a qualification, that's fine. The hard part is the shoot, no shoot decisions. And sharpening your skills is something that has to go beyond just the mechanics of a skill, right? It's not just like I said, I could shoot well when it's time to shoot. It's knowing when I have to shoot and when not. And this is a big thing as far as decision making goes, is when to go fast and be decisive and aggressive, and when to slow things down and to kind of capture or get a grasp of that operational momentum and take a minute to collect yourself and your team to gain an advantage. That takes a good understanding of the situation. And some people might say situational awareness, but I think it's a lot more complicated than that. It's clarity in the objective. It's clarity of the risk or risks. It's clarity among the team. Like, you know what's going on. You know the objective. You know the situation. Does everybody else? And also making sure that your leadership and your bosses are on the same page as, you or the other people out there hacking the mish or whatever. So proficiency goes beyond just the hard skills. It's also the soft skills, like being able to operate in that team environment, being able to operate in an environment where we don't have time to necessarily take a huddle, right? So you respond to a chaotic scene and things are just getting sideways and people keep talking on the radio, and you just need to act. You just need to perceive the situation and respond to that situation. And in a perfect world, we would all do that kind of in sync and with harmony among the rest of the group. So proficiency goes beyond the hard skills. You have to practice that stuff as well. And that doesn't happen overnight. So as Jim talks you through these concepts, understand that some of these are kind of academic. And I accept and appreciate that some people are not into nerding out on stuff like this the way we are. But what you have to understand about fighting and winning on a quote unquote battlefield, or your operational environment, whatever that looks like, is you have to balance the brains and the bronze. And I want you to think about how many ill-equipped forces throughout the course of history have won wars against big, well-organized armies. So it's because they were able to outmaneuver or outsmart their adversary in some way. It wasn't because they were able to overwhelm them with firepower or with numbers in a lot of cases. So what we want to do is take things like that kind of history or those stories and case studies and past lessons, and not only understand what went right or wrong, but also when I talked about that normal distribution of people and the outliers, the innovators, right? The ideas people. What I want you to do is take all of these past lessons, all of these ideas, all of these things, and be able to sort of synergize them into a new application or a new idea, a new strategy for the next fight, because the next fight might look different. And if you have 3 or 4 or 5 or 100 options to pull from, right? There's some complexity with that, but also your ability to come up with something new and novel to win your new fight, if that makes sense. So it's understanding that the brain stuff still matters. You still need the academics. The nerd stuff still counts, right? We're nerds here. We get it, but you have to balance that too. And what I don't want you to hear out of that lesson or that theme is that you should set aside the bronze. Because you want to be smart, but you also have to have the tenacity and the discipline to go train and work hard and outperform and outmaneuver your adversary and kick ass. And so the final key theme that I want to talk about is balancing all of these things. And that is something that is the product of a lot of hard work. And if you're listening to this podcast while you're also, at the gym or on a run or something like that, then good on you, because you're working on both. But make sure that you also take some time to set aside and get out and do the stuff that isn't always that fun or easy, because that's important too. All right. That's all I got. I'm going to let Jim take it from here, and I hope you guys enjoy what we got for you tonight.
This is Jim. I want to do a solo episode and kind of spend a little time with you tonight going over the big recurring themes in our show. Like, what are the big ideas? What are we trying to accomplish here, right? I think sometimes it helps to get them in the context of a story, like when we do a case study on the LA riots or Waco. And sometimes it helps to get them in the context of a dedicated discussion, right? Lecture discussion, like when we talked through how to analyze terrain, observation, cover, and concealment. obstacles, key terrain, that kind of thing. But I think with the podcast format, where a lot of the time listening is like it's a secondary activity, right, to driving or working out or getting your Punisher skull lower back tattoo or whatever it is, sometimes because it's secondary, it's tough to retain some of the more abstract ideas, some of the more academic stuff. And I realize, this is not an academic course. This is something you listen to for fun, but kind of our shtick is professional development, right? We're trying to teach you stuff. And I think that is one of the things that makes us not just another true crime show or not just another, let's watch videos of criminals doing stupid criminal stuff. That's fun and it's interesting. And sometimes you can learn some stuff from it. But I think, in the competitive environment that is combat, that is what it really means to operate in a concealed carry personal defense environment, certainly the military or law enforcement, where you are putting your performance against somebody else and the outcome might be very, very grave, literally. You want to do all your learning up front, right? We want to get as much information into your brain so you're making good decisions as we can. And that's been kind of our mission all along, right? So let's talk about the big ideas that Mike and I really try to hammer home, the lessons we wish we understood better when we were trainees or captains or FTOs, whatever. And that we want better understood across the communities, right? That we want everyone to understand the baseline, that I think if we raise the baseline across all those communities, we're going to get better performance and safer people and more security. And that's what we're really shooting for, right? And maybe from this discussion, we might uncover some gaps, right? Some areas that Mike and I need to hit that we're missing. So that's one of the reasons I'm going through this is in my own mind, I was kind of going through our past topics and what we've talked about, what we've hit, what we need to keep hitting, what we've hit badly. Not all of our episodes, I think, were perfect. So I'm going back and trying to think what did we get wrong? And if we got something wrong, let us know. Shoot us an email. We love that engagement. Find us on Facebook. I'm very active on our Facebook page. So if we mess something up, let us know. And we'll try to address it. Or if we just miss something, if there's some idea you want us to talk about or an event, a case study, shoot us a message. We love stuff like that. So thinking about the ideas, the big themes of the shows, our biggest one is Boyd. Boyd was an Air Force colonel. He was an instructor at the Air Force Fighter Weapons School. And he came up with the math, the thermodynamic equations that became the F-15, the F-16, and the F-22, right? So big brain, very aggressive fighter pilot type guy. And he was an ideas guy. And his ideas really resonated with both Mike and me when we were younger. And we want to help proliferate those ideas and help get them out there, right? So his ideas are a big and recurring part of our show. And in fact, his words are our motto, right? When people, ideas, and hardware on our logo, we got that verbatim from Boyd. And from him, we figured out the OODA cycle, the observe, orient, decide, act, decision loop, and how important it is, one, to just understand it, period, and understand that any two bodies in conflict, whether we're talking about Russia versus Ukraine or Mike Tyson versus, Muhammad Ali, whoever, or you against some methed out thug in a Walmart parking lot, you have a decision cycle and the opponent has a decision cycle. And it's really, really important to be self-aware about your own decision making. And you need to figure out and then interfere with the other guy's decision making. There are lots of ways you can do that. Deception, ambiguity, false signals, blocking his view, blinding him, maybe literally. And so the OODA loop and the OODA cycle are big, big deals. And if you don't feel like you have mastery of it, I recommend stop what you're doing. Go find the book Boyd. That's usually the first way people really get into it. If you're not ready to go, do a full book, just go to the Wikipedia page and type in OODA loop. and find out what there is to find out. And then hopefully that might inspire you to go find the book. The book is called Boyd, the Fighter Pilot Who Changed the Art of War by Robert Coram, or Coram. Okay. From Boyd, we get stuff like you have to train your people to understand their left and right limits so they aren't constantly stopping to ask what to do next. Because if they are, that slows down the decision and action cycle, right? Especially if they're asking your permission to do what they already know is the right answer. And we've seen it. We've seen it over and over and over. At the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School shooting at Parkland, somebody saw the shooter with his weapons, and they didn't think they had permission to call a lockdown. They thought that could only come from the principal. Oof. Right? So getting decisions made at the right level and making sure that everyone knows what decisions they're allowed to make and what they're not is a big, big deal, right? From that concept, we also see why rules and procedures are a big deal, especially in an organization like any police agency or the military. The way you write rules matters, and how much latitude you give your guys to interpret the rules matters, right? There are dudes, especially in the military, who will follow the rules off a cliff. We get the importance of following rules, but understand that when you write a rule, people are actually going to follow it, and some people aren't going to follow it, right? So you need to think about how you're writing them and what the secondary and tertiary effects of and unintended consequences of any rule you make, right? We also, from Boyd, get the importance of ambiguity resolution, that the other guy is going to try to hide his intent, right? A mugger isn't just going to walk around with a gun out, walking down the street. He's going to hide the fact that he is a mugger, and he's going to come up and give you some song and dance about he lost his dog, or he just needs a little cash to get some gas to get down the road, or whatever. And he's going to use that ambiguity to close the distance and minimize your reaction time and surprise you. And that surprise, that reaction, is your OODA loop. That's where you're going to observe some stimulus, interpret it, figure out what it means, make a decision about what to do, and then act. So he's trying to mess with your OODA loop, so you need to mess right back with his. And you need to make sure your OODA loop is so tight that your reaction is solid, as in both quick and accurate. That also plays into the importance of an early recognition of a crisis. Knowing that you're in a crisis, the quicker you can figure that out, the quicker you can figure out that things are going sideways, that's my big spiel about that, the safer you're going to be. From this, we also get the idea of agility. Agility isn't just like, dog training or a fighter jet turning really tight, right? Agility is your ability to change things up. You need to change up the situation for the other guy. If one thing you're trying is not working, try something else, right? And this is a big thing from Mike, especially with agility, is we have to be flexible in how we escalate and de-escalate force in a conflict. You don't just ratchet up one ratchet click at a time. You have to be able to bounce around on the force spectrum or the force pyramid, whatever your agency trains, as the situation changes. And maybe the other guy dials it up a notch, so maybe you don't dial it up a notch, you dial it up 3 notches. You have to be able to explain your action, you have to be able to defend your decision, but you don't have to tit for tat in a fight, right? Mike also points out that for less lethal and de-escalation to be viable, you need lethal cover, right? You don't put yourself at risk in order to de-escalate, because you have to survive every fight. That's a big part of risk management. We'll get into that in a bit. Also, to de-escalate or to try less lethal, you need something between you and the bad guy. That something could be time, could be distance, could be shielding, but you need something between you and the bad guy. My take on de-escalation, and this is more like a concealed carry idea, is you need to control your own emotions, right? Let him be the spun up one. You don't have to be the spun up one. And if you spin up, you do it deliberately. You do it as an act, right? Be prepared to apologize. Use your words. Use your words even when you're scared and when you're stressed. And one of the things you're going to find when you pressure test your self-defense stuff is many, many people lose the ability to talk when they get freaked out. Well, that's when it's the most important to talk, right? And for me, just as important as the OODA loop are the concepts of ORM, operational risk management, and CRM, crew resource management. Those are both terms I stole from the military. And of all the things I've been taught in the military, those two ideas have been some of the most valuable. So ORM, Operational Risk Management, is a framework. It's a structure of ideas for figuring out danger. How do you assess how much danger you're actually in, right? And also figuring out what you can do about that danger, right? You have to sort out what can hurt you, how likely it is, and how bad it can hurt you. And then you need to come up with some solutions to dial down either the probability or the severity. And then you ultimately figure out if the juice is worth the squeeze. And that should drive a lot of your decisions, right? CRM, Crew Resource Management, is a concept from aviation about how people are supposed to contribute to the team in a cockpit, right? Picture like a bomber with a pilot, a co-pilot, maybe a flight engineer, maybe a navigator, maybe a sensor operator, maybe a tail gunner, whoever. They all have to work together, and they have to work together with the machinery, right? With all the computers and technology, and sometimes it's working, sometimes it's not. They have to work together in a formation with other aircraft and integrated with a stack of other planes. That's a lot. That's a lot of teamwork that has to happen, and it has to happen smoothly. And teamwork is more than just chanting "Go team" and doing spirit fingers or whatever, right? You have to do something meaningful to contribute to the team. And I've found CRM and the principles of it work well, not just in the cockpit, but in any crisis environment, right? You have to contribute in a meaningful way to each component of DAM class. DAM class is an acronym: decision making, assertiveness, mission analysis, communication, which is both internal and external, leadership, adaptability, and situational awareness. If you make an effort to contribute to the team's decision-making on all of those axes, the team's going to do better. You're going to do better. You also have to watch for teamwork traps, like passenger syndrome. Oh, this guy's got it. I'm just going to sit here. Or this guy's an idiot. I'm just going to sit here. As soon as you do that, you're not part of the team anymore. Another one is halo effect. Ooh, he's a SWAT guy. Oh, he's got this. Ooh, he's a evaluator pilot, or he's a colonel. Well, I better do whatever he tells me, even if he tells me something stupid, right? You also have to watch out for dangerous attitudes like complacency or get-there-itis. Hey, we gotta go. Wait a second. Do we really have to go, or can we wait, right? Jumping topics a little bit. I hit this a lot on the Facebook page, but less on the podcast. Basic professional communication is a huge deal. Whether you're responding to an email or writing a report or setting up a memo asking for more money or a policy change, and especially when you're engaging with the public on a press release about like an officer-involved shooting, the way you write matters. And I realize that doesn't sound very tactical. It's not like winning a gunfight, but I'll tell you, if you screw this up, you're going to screw up things like policies. You're going to screw up things like getting the resources you need to win the gunfights, right? So the way you write matters. And if you're not sure, get help. You have to be clear. You have to be concise, understandable, and direct. None of this, the vehicle was red in color, or the subject was traveling at a high rate of speed, or arrest made, reference homicide. What is that bullshit? Don't use that. Don't talk like that. Just speak normal English, right? When you use pseudo-official jargon or passive voice, like, and then an officer-involved shooting occurred, instead of, and then police officers shot the guy, you sound like you're trying to hide the truth and distance your agency from responsibility. That's shady. Anyone who reads it knows it's shady. People key in on that, so don't do it. It burns credibility. Speaking of professionalism, say you want a job anywhere. You want to work at Burger King. You want to work at the FBI. There are some keys to succeeding right away. The big ones, you show up. You show up to the interview. You apply for the job. It's amazing how many people don't apply for the cool jobs. You got to show up. You got to be at the right place at the right time, wearing the right clothes, displaying the right attitude. If you do those things well, you're usually going to get ahead, like right away. Now that gets you a little inertia. It doesn't get you all the way there, right? How you succeed in training A lot of that has to do with your ability to take and learn from feedback. You got to be coachable. When someone critiques you, especially in formal training, take notes. Shut up and listen. Don't argue. If you argue with like an instructor trying to teach you something, it will almost never end well. So don't do that. And if you're trying to train yourself in whatever capacity, shooting training, physical training, but especially physical training, you need to take some time to take care of you, right? You have to do injury prevention. You need to be thoughtful about whatever the training is. And let's take physical training. You got to be thoughtful about the food you're eating, and especially the calories you're taking in. And again, with a physical fitness thing, you need to trust the process. There is a process that is working out. There's a process that is learning how to shoot. There's a process that is learning how to fly an airplane. And it will get frustrating, and you will screw it up, and you will have disappointments. You will prang in a landing, or you will send a round someplace you did not intend to send that round. Or when it comes to physical fitness, you might eat that Cinnabon when you were trying to be real careful and only eat salad. That happens. There's going to be setbacks, but trust the process. Every day is a new day. Every training iteration is a new training iteration. Every time at the gym is a new time at the gym. Keep fighting. Follow the process. Trust the process. Shifting gears a little bit, when we're picking someone for a highly demanding job, we're picking somebody for the SWAT team, picking somebody for the FBI, picking somebody for an Air Force flying job or a weapons school, whatever. We are picking for certain traits, right? There are certain characteristics that we really want in those people. And it depends job to job, right? But often there's kind of some patterns there. We're looking for confidence. Can they hold their own? We're looking for dominance a little bit. Can they hold their own in a group full of other dominant people? Aggressiveness. Are they willing to fight? Are they willing to keep fighting? Competitiveness. Do they want to win? Do they hate losing? Obsessiveness. Are they careful? Are they thoughtful and considerate about how they do their jobs, how they follow procedures, how they set up their gear? But we need those characteristics at like an 8 out of 10, not a 12 out of 10. And different jobs need those at different levels, right? And they have to be balanced. Someone who is only those traits is a fucking pain to work with. You got to balance that a little bit, right? You got to balance it with coachability. They got to be able to listen to critique and feedback. You got to balance it with social awareness. Someone who's all those traits and not socially aware is awful to deal with, right? You got to be able to work within a team. The analogy I like is the lifeboat. You got to be the type of guy other people want to have in the lifeboat, because you might literally be in a lifeboat with those other people on your team, right? Those individual traits at the right levels sometimes get shorthanded down to like alpha dog or type A. There's a lot more to it than that, right? One of the most important personality traits to assess in a candidate for a tactical job is how they view rules. I'm sure there's some term for it, but I don't know it. How they view rules is a big deal, right? In the military, rules are a thing. In law enforcement, rules are a thing. Even in concealed carry, and think about this, rules are a thing in concealed carry, maybe especially there where you might go to jail for how a shoot goes. So consider, can this candidate follow rules? Will they follow rules off a cliff? There are some jobs I want very black and white people working, right? A security forces airman working security at a nuclear missile launch facility. I do not want that guy getting real creative, right? Either you have a restricted area badge or you don't. I don't want someone to be able to talk their way around that kid. There are some jobs I need people who are very comfortable with tossing the rule book. And there's some jobs I need you to follow the rules right up until it's time to toss that rule book, right? So you got to think, for whatever job you're hiring for, how rulesy do you want the candidates? And choose carefully.
This is Mike, and I just want to jump in real quick to announce our new partnership with Brink Drones. Brink has created life-saving capabilities in a drone that can break windows, fly into houses and confined spaces, and even crash into things and stay in the air with advanced pilot assistance that does not use GPS. Brink drones are built in the USA. It has night vision and IR that can function in blacked out and zero light conditions. It can flip itself back over, and it is a flying cell phone with two-way communication and a live video feed. It can even carry and drop off items for hostage negotiators with the payload feature. Brink has a really cool and compelling heritage that came to be after the 1 October mass shooting at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, and they are committed in their mission to leverage technology to save lives. And I can tell you firsthand that their drones will do just that by flying into places that are too dangerous to risk human lives. If you work in public safety, your agency needs to see what this drone can do. Go check out Brink Drones at brinkdrones.com, or feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to tell you all about them. Again, that's Brink, BRINC, drones.com.
So once you have those candidates, when you're running training, you have to balance between fundamentals for the lowest common denominator versus pushing boundaries and comfort zones. You need to add some chaos and friction, but you need to add it in a controlled and deliberate way. It shouldn't feel controlled to the student, but you have to control it. Training is your opportunity to influence the OODA loops of your troops, right? To build their decision cycle, to teach them what stimuli to watch for. Hey, don't watch their eyes, watch their hands, right? It's also when you teach them what calls they can make that you're going to back them up on, and what decisions you're not going to tolerate. Hey, don't ever do that shit again, right? It's your chance to inculcate good habits that are going to help them navigate fog and friction and those ambiguous situations. So you need to do what you can to replicate fog and friction. You need to create some stress and strain of an operational environment. And you have to do it very safely. And that requires, in my experience, good role players. Without good role players, you don't have that live action environment that you need to build good trainees. So now you have your trainee, you got to equip them, right? When we're picking gear, any equipment needs to be tested among all the other stuff it has to work with. So it has to be not bought in a vacuum. You buy it as part of a system or a system of systems. And I don't like the term weapon system, but consider if you're buying a scope, it's got to be able to fit on whatever the rifle is. If you're buying a holster, it has to work with whatever body armor your guys are wearing so that the body armor isn't sitting on the gun on the guy's belt, right? You have to test it. You have to test it in an operationally realistic environment. And that doesn't mean just hitting it with a hammer to torture test it or whatever. It means working in environments like hot, cold, sandy, dark. Wherever you're going to need it to work, you got to work with it in that environment. When we are picking tactics, we have to plan in the open, which means letting the crazy guy talk, right? You got to, get the big whiteboard, invite everyone in, and let's talk about what's working and what's not, what we need to change, right? And then when someone throws up an idea, some bar napkin, we got to evaluate those ideas. It starts with inviting a quorum of sober people to come look at the idea and tell us whether it's stupid or not. And then we need to test the idea. We need to test the tactics. So you test tactics kind of the same way you test gear. You create an operational environment. You use role players, sometimes witting, sometimes unwitting, depending on what the tactic is. And you try it. And then once you've vetted it, you need to write it down. The difference between science and screwing around is writing stuff down. That way, you can teach those tactics to everyone else. You can share those tactics with other agencies because your tactics should appear random to the enemy. They should not appear random to your own dudes, right? So let's talk about messing with the enemy. When you're planning for a fight, you need to plan to a standard of achieving gross overmatch. Gross overmatch means like you get a level of advantage where you have total domination against the other guy. And that sounds kind of cartoonish, but I mean it. Like you have got to absolutely have an overwhelming advantage. And that's a risk management thing, right? Because risk accumulates over time. So you don't have to just survive that fight. You have to survive every fight. So I never ever want a 51 to 49% advantage. I want like a 500 to 1 advantage because I'm going to have to survive 500 fights over the course of a 20-year career. And that's true in the military. It's true in law enforcement. Hopefully that's not true in civilian concealed carry. If you're getting in 500 fights, you're probably screwing something up. Maybe you need to move, right? So how do you get overmatch? Well, one thing is you avoid fighting until you have it, right? You maneuver, you get away from the fight until you've got an overmatch. But you get overmatched usually by gaining advantage along the lines of the principles of warfare, which are mouse, right? Mass, offense, surprise, security, maneuver, objective, unity of command, simplicity, and economy of force. So you pick one of those, or two of them, and you try to max out your advantage in them. Whatever you got to work with, that's what you do. You also have to account for the other guy's principles. Where is he sitting on mass? Does he have the ability to create some initiative against you? Is he trying to find something you're not prepared for and exploit it? Is he trying to get behind your lines and cut your throat when you're on the way to the bathroom? Is he going to keep maneuvering until he can outnumber you somewhere? What's his goal? How unified is his command, and how does he move commands up and down his chain? And economy of force. How's he using his guys? What objectives is he doing, or is he getting distracted? So you have to think about the principles of war, not just from your perspective, but from the other guy's perspective. You also have to account for terrain in your planning. And that includes both big macro terrain, like cities and mountain ranges, and little micro terrain, like tables and curbs. And think about that. Even in the context of a city, a municipal police department, there's absolutely terrain across a city, and it usually changes across the city, right? Population density is a big part of that. You have to also account for things like weather and bystanders, and you have to see this chessboard from both sides, right? The other guy has terrain too. If you're raiding a house, you have to know that guy has the home field advantage. He knows his terrain better than you know his terrain. And your plan has to be able to withstand some fog and friction. That means you have to build a plan that looks a little bit more like an AK-47 or a Glock than like a Swiss watch. Now that you have that plan, you got to rehearse it. And you got to rehearse that plan with all the players that are going to play. You have to do it in an operationally realistic environment, and you have to do it all kitted up, right? Full dress rehearsal. And if you can't rehearse it to success, you're probably not going to win in the real fight, right? And if you really want overmatch, you've got to rehearse it to the point where not only are you sometimes winning, you got to rehearse it to the point where you're always winning, even when the opposition force, the role players, are throwing monkey wrenches at you, right? Even when they're throwing curveballs at you, you're still winning. That's when you know the rehearsals are going well, right? In terms of overmatch, another thing we are very concerned with is ambush and counter ambush. Because we know that when people are planning to cause us trouble, they want gross overmatch, right? And one of the ways you get it is a sudden surprise attack from concealment where the enemy is stuck in a position of disadvantage. Ambush is a big way to get there, right? And that's especially true when you are the asymmetrically weaker party, right? When you have a gross disadvantage from mass, as in you're wildly outnumbered, ambush is one of the ways you get advantage back, right? If you're getting ambushed, you have three basic options: counterattack, move out of the kill zone, or get help from outside. So the longer you wait to do one of those, the worse your outcome's going to be. Jumping around a little bit, topics-wise, all safety and security requires a layered approach. Whether we're talking about home security, keeping a home invasion robbery crew out of your bedroom, or cybersecurity, keeping China out of your gas pumps or out of your, police records or out of your secure networks in the military, you need layers. And you manage those layers like you manage slices of Swiss cheese, right? You got to keep the holes and the gaps small so you can trap human errors, because there's always going to be some errors and some gaps to keep the bad guys from getting through. When it comes to first aid, we like rapid transport. Mike and I are both big fans of get the guy moving, get him to a hospital, fight for making that golden hour the golden 5 minutes. We like serious training. We like approved tourniquets within lunging distance. The tourniquet doesn't do any good back in your office or back in your car. And we want you to keep your training fresh and relevant, so you're not trying to plug bullet holes with tampons because you saw it in a YouTube video, right? Go get real training so that you know why that's stupid. When it comes to shooting, the secret to shooting good is doing lots of deliberate dry fire. It's thinking about your process of shooting and then practicing it over and over and over. And also getting some coaching and feedback. You need that. But you can get pretty good doing deliberate dry fire. You have to watch out for the mind traps of tactical fantasies. And understand it's really easy to fall for them, right? You break those traps by looking for evidence and statistics, by analyzing the likelihood and severity of different scenarios, right? So you have a truck gun, you have an M4 or AR-15 or whatever in the back of your pickup truck. That's cool. That's your right as a human being. But why? What scenario do you find that truck gun relevant in? How likely is that scenario? How dangerous is that scenario? And balance that risk with what are the odds someone's going to break into your truck and steal that and then use that to kill innocent people or threaten innocent people. You got to break the fantasies. You have to, right? A couple of ways you do that is you start taking training that puts you and your equipment under some stress and strain so that you make all your mistakes in a safe environment. You got to do your learning in training, not in the fight. Your training needs to account for some chaos and the fact that you're going to lose a lot of IQ points once that adrenaline hits. It's easy to train on stuff you're already good at, but you need training in the stuff you suck at. It's great if you want to go take a carbine course as a concealed carrier. That's cool. I do it. It's fun. But understand that the scenarios where you're going to have to run around with an AR-15 and point and shoot are pretty limited. At least so far in my experience. So are you training to the most likely scenario? Right? How often are you taking a pistol course? How often are you taking a serious first aid course? How often are you taking a driving course? You know, thinking about things that can actually hurt you. Bad decisions when you're driving can get you hurt, right? Also in training, habits are a really big deal. Habits set up the pathways in your OODA loop. They get you automaticity, and that gets you permanence. So even when you're eyeballs deep in fog and friction, the habits are going to protect you. If your habits suck, though, you're going to tend to suck. So being thoughtful about what habits you are reinforcing in yourself and which ones you're not is worth thinking about and worth taking some deliberate effort on. I talked a little about surviving long term, right? As far as risk management goes, you got to survive not just the fight you're in, but every fight you're going to be in over the course of your career. And over the course of a career, if you're going to survive long term in a high risk job and a high stress job, you got to develop some resilience skills. That sounds foofy, but you got to do it. That demands building a social network. A couple of people you can lean on, not just your spouse, right? You got to take care of your body. You have to. That includes things like stretching. That includes things like eating right, getting some sleep. You got to get help when you need it. You have to set some thresholds in your mind of when you're going to reach out to your bros over a problem versus when you're going to reach out to a doc, and when it's time to admit things and talk to your boss and say, hey boss, I need to not be working today. I got a problem, right? And you also have to stay the hell away from the more destructive coping mechanisms. If you're already in a hole, don't dig it any deeper with alcohol. Don't dig it any deeper with screwing around on your spouse. That will only cause you more drama. As far as resilience goes, it's not just about you, right? Your organization has to be resilient when things get ugly, right? If your organization is going to survive a serious hit, you need to make organizational resiliency a priority. You have to exercise a plan for losing comms, losing computers, losing electricity, losing a bunch of dudes. And that's ugly to think about, but that happens. You know, what happens when, especially in a small agency, half of your force gets taken out of the fight for some reason, right? And that could be anything. That could be a nasty virus takes them out. Have we seen that in the last couple of years? That could be a mass violence attack takes them out, or a natural disaster. Speaking of natural disasters, for disaster prep, you need to know the local hazards and really understand them, right? Understand severity and likelihood and kind of where you're sitting, maybe literally where you're sitting in relation to those hazards, like where are you in relation to the flood level, where's the water line going to be when the hurricane hits, right? You need to develop out a couple sets of plans. You need to develop out a plan to stay, shelter in place, and you need to develop a plan to evacuate, to go, right? And understand that evacuation might be real tough, especially if you make that decision late. And when it comes time to prepping, you need to think a lot more about things like sanitation, debris, dust, dealing with bugs. Then you need to worry about armor-piercing incendiary rounds, for all the zombies. Now, I'm a prepper, first to admit it. But my experience with disasters is sitting in your house alone with no power for a week or two, with no air conditioning, no TV, no internet, no phone, no nothing, no beer, no cold beer at least. That scenario happens way, way, way more often than the zombies. So consider that in your risk management, your preparation management, right? Another disaster, active shooters. It's come up a lot. We've talked about it in a couple different episodes. We need to pay attention to troubling behaviors, right? Stalking, unexplained violent outbursts, stated threats, acquiring supplies, deployment of assets. Those red flags need to stand out to you. What you do about them is a judgment call, right? Maybe that's report it. Maybe that's talk to the guy. Maybe that is just keep an eye on it, watching for the next red flag. But you can't ignore it. You got to do something, right? When the shooting starts, the people who are trained and equipped need to race to, close with, and engage so they can stop the killing and stop the dying. The people who are not trained and equipped need to actually run, hide, or fight, and not just sit there and freeze. So I think that's all I can think of when I contemplate like what are our big recurring themes. Those are the things that stand out to me, and the things that I really do want to make sure are part of our collective consciousness as Tactical Tangents and as a podcast and among our listeners. I'd be interested to hear: is there anything that I missed that you think that we hit well? Is there anything that we have missed in the podcast that maybe we need to add and talk about more? I'd be really interested to hear what you have to say about that. You can send me an email, jim@tacticaltangents.com, and I'd love to hear it. That's about all I got. Be safe out there, cheering you on, and be smart out there.
All right, guys, that's all we got for tonight. This episode is brought to you by Drip Drop. Drip Drop Oral Rehydration Solution is an electrolyte powder that you mix with water. It was formulated by a doctor for quick absorption. I work in the desert, and it only takes a few hours in the heat, wearing body armor, carrying around a bunch of gear before I start feeling like crap and fall behind the curve in dehydration. Drip Drop keeps you in the fight so you can finish the mission and rehab for the next one. Go get you some at dripdrop.com or on Amazon, or ask your supply guy to find it for you.
This episode is also brought to you by Dry Fire Mag. Ammo is hard to find these days, and you need to stay proficient by working your dry fire training. Dry Fire Mag solves the common and annoying problem in dry fire of constantly having to rack your slide to reset the trigger. With Dry Fire Mag, all you do is clear your weapon, load this training mag up, and work on your trigger work. Check them out on dryfiremag.com.
Don't forget that we put out new episodes on the 1st and the 15th of every month. If you like what we're doing, you can have our Patreon. Give us $1 for each new episode. That money's going to go back into bringing you good content. If you want to interact with us, you could find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are at TacTangents. You can also email info@tacticaltangents.com. And one last thing, our Facebook discussion group. We've got a little group going on Facebook. If you go to the groups tab on our page, you can join it. We've got more followers on our page than we have in the group. So I know there's some of you out there following the Facebook page that are on Facebook that are not in the group. Lots of like-minded people in there. So come hang out with us. All right. That's all we got. Good talk.